You're watching Laura Collins, the channel where we cut through the noise and give you the real story behind the world's biggest conflicts. I'm Laura, and today we're diving deep into something that has completely shaken the battlefield in Ukraine. What you're about to hear is not just a war update, it's a masterclass in military deception, technological warfare, and strategic genius that historians will be talking about for decades. We're breaking this down into 7 powerful sections, so stick with me till the end, because the last section will completely change how you see this war. And hey, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now, because this is exactly the kind of analysis you won't find anywhere else. Drop a comment below and tell me, did you see this coming? Let's get into it. Everyone thought Ukraine had fallen. When Ukrainian forces pulled back on the Zaporizhzhia and Pokrovsk fronts, the world gasped. News headlines screamed defeat. Military analysts warned that the road to Kiev was being pried open. But here is the truth that almost nobody saw at the time. This was not a collapse. This was a calculated, cold-blooded trap. Ukraine was not losing ground. Ukraine was setting the stage. In the art of war, there is a concept as old as warfare itself. Sacrifice a small piece to win the whole board. And that is precisely what Ukraine's military command executed with ruthless precision. By appearing to retreat, they drew Russian forces into a false sense of dominance, a euphoria of victory that would soon turn into their worst nightmare. By February 2026, that nightmare arrived. Ukraine launched a devastating offensive in Zaporizhzhia that shattered Russian lines completely. It was the strongest breakthrough on the internal front in 2.5 years. The defeat the world mourned months earlier had in fact been the opening move of one of the most brilliant strategic gambits of the entire war. The retreat was the bait, and Russia swallowed it whole. By late 2025, the Russian military was riding high. General Gerasimov stood before cameras and declared victory in Kupiansk. Putin gave speech after speech boasting about advances on the Zaporizhzhia and Donetsk fronts. State television ran celebrations. Russian military bloggers cheered. The Kremlin was drunk on momentum, and that intoxication would prove fatal. While Russia was busy celebrating and redirecting its forces, ammunition, and logistical capacity toward the eastern axis, Kupiansk, Pokrovsk, it made a catastrophic error. It stripped its southern lines bare. The attention of Moscow's entire command echelon was locked onto the east, treating it as the war's decisive theater. The south was left as an afterthought. This is exactly what Ukraine's military planners had been waiting for. While Russia was building monuments to its own victories, Ukraine was quietly, systematically repositioning its forces along the Zaporizhzhia axis. The 13th National Guard Brigade, the Kartia units, and the 33rd Separate Assault Regiment were moving into place, not for a routine skirmish, but for a crushing blow that would tear through an enemy that no longer believed the South could bite back. Russia had handed Ukraine the perfect conditions for a counterstrike, and Ukraine was not going to waste it. When Ukraine struck, it did not knock. It kicked the door off its hinges. The Yanure and Gure rivers were crossed with speed that stunned even experienced military observers. 8 strategic settlements, including Oristopol, Snivka, and Verbvo, were cleared of Russian forces in rapid succession. This was not a slow, grinding infantry advance. This was a mechanized storm. According to United 24 media, Ukrainian forces recaptured an area exceeding 460 square kilometers over the course of a single month. To put that in perspective, that is roughly the size of Prague, one of the most beautiful and storied cities in all of Europe, reclaimed in 30 days. The kilometers of rubble that Russia had seized by sacrificing tens of thousands of soldiers across an entire brutal winter were erased by a single focused Ukrainian operation. The 36th Russian Army Corps, caught on the southern axis and facing encirclement by 2 powerful Ukrainian combat groups, was forced into a panicked eastward retreat. Despite Moscow's frantic deployment of artillery, air power, and ground reinforcements to plug the breach, the Ukrainian offensive could not be stopped. Russian defense lines, which had been presented to the world as impenetrable fortifications, crumbled like wet sand. This was not just a territorial gain. This was the most consequential internal front offensive Ukraine had mounted since the war began. And Russia never saw it coming. Now, here is the part of this story that most coverage is missing, and it is the most important part. The Russian collapse on the southern front was not primarily caused by superior Ukrainian firepower. It was caused by something far more modern, far more devastating, and far more humiliating for Moscow. It was caused by a software update. Russia had been secretly procuring Starlink terminals on the black market, circumventing international sanctions to use SpaceX's satellite network for military command and control at the front. These terminals were the nervous system of Russia's battlefield operations, connecting artillery targeting systems, drone pilots, battalion commanders, and logistics coordinators in real time. Then, in a precisely coordinated move between Ukraine and its Western allies, those terminals were geofenced, blocked, switched off. In an instant, tens of thousands of Russian soldiers were plunged into total digital darkness. Artillery crews could not receive targeting coordinates. Drone operators could not transmit footage. Battalion commanders could not issue orders to the troops next to them. The entire Russian command and control architecture, worth billions of dollars, went silent simultaneously. And Ukraine, with its own Starlink network fully operational, moved through the chaos like a surgeon with night vision goggles while the enemy stumbled blind. The world's so-called Second Army had become dependent on its enemy's technology, and the moment that lifeline was cut, it collapsed. What happened next revealed the true depth of Russia's technological bankruptcy. Scrambling to restore communications after the Starlink shutdown, Russia deployed the Barrage 1 stratospheric balloon as an emergency communication relay. It sounds almost comedic, until you realize this was a military superpower's actual contingency plan. And then it gets worse. The prevailing westerly winds over Ukraine blew the balloon back toward Russia, turning the operation into a complete and embarrassing fiasco. Meanwhile, in the town of Tunat, the human cost of this communication breakdown reached its most tragic form. Generals in Moscow, completely disconnected from ground reality, were still issuing orders to advance, even as their soldiers had no artillery support, no drone intelligence, and no situational awareness whatsoever. Russian field commanders, cut off and blind, sent their men forward anyway, into waiting Ukrainian machine guns, mortars, and snipers. It was a massacre born entirely from ignorance and broken chains of command. Following this devastating Russian failure, Ukrainian forces launched an unexpected counterattack and fully liberated Tunat. Then came the moment that said everything about the state of Russian morale. Ukrainian drones, rather than dropping bombs, broadcast a simple message over loudspeakers. Surrender. Your commanders have abandoned you. Moscow has forgotten you. Exhausted, frozen, and starving Russian soldiers laid down their weapons en masse. An army's morale had collapsed before its ammunition ran out. The disaster was not confined to Zaporizhzhia. In the north, on the Kharkiv border, Vladimir Putin's proudly announced 18th Division, deployed with grand ceremonies and triumphant promises of a buffer zone, was fighting for its very survival. And the enemy was not just Ukraine. It was the cold, the silence, and the starvation. General Frost, the legendary Russian ally that stopped Napoleon and Hitler in their tracks, has changed sides in this war. Near the village of Chuhunivka, Russian soldiers sat shivering inside fuel-depleted armored vehicles, unable to receive retreat orders, unable to call for support, unable to communicate with anyone. Under constant pressure from Ukrainian artillery and FPV drones, they were completely isolated. Leaked radio conversations confirmed what field reports suspected. Soldiers were surrendering in groups, not because they were coerced, but because they had simply nothing left. Russia's proudly proclaimed buffer zone had become a frozen graveyard. Villages captured at enormous cost were being lost one by one because the 18th Division could no longer mount a coordinated defense. On paper, it was a formidable force. In reality, it was a blind giant being dismembered piece by Ukraine's agile, connected, and digitally superior units. The Starlink blackout had not just silenced communication, it had severed the logistical arteries that determined who ate, who had fuel, and who had any chance of surviving another Ukrainian winter at war. The military collapse on the ground is only one layer of a much deeper catastrophe unfolding inside Russia itself. The bloodshed at the front has spilled into Moscow's economy, its propaganda machine, and the Kremlin's rapidly eroding credibility. According to Bloomberg assessments from Western officials, Russia suffered approximately 9,000 more casualties in January 2026 than it could replace. The human conveyor belt is breaking down, and it is taking the Russian economy with it. Consumer prices are surging. Cucumber prices alone have risen 425%. Russia's projected budget deficit for 2025 stands at $73 billion. The war economy is devouring the civilian economy, and ordinary Russians are paying the price with their wallets and their sons. Meanwhile, the Russian Defense Ministry published official maps claiming 30% control of Munograd, using footage later exposed as video from December 2025. Old clips recycled as fresh victories. A superpower, lying to its own people with outdated footage because it has no real victories left to show. Ukraine, in sharp contrast, has completed the construction of a multi-layered $2 billion high-tech defense fortress in the east, integrating dragon's teeth barriers, drone concealment corridors, autonomous unmanned ground vehicles, and FPV swarms. In January alone, 7,000 unmanned ground vehicle missions were completed. Russia's armored assault doctrine is now functionally obsolete against this technological wall. The 460 square kilometers reclaimed in Zaporizhzhia and the oil fires burning across Luhansk are proof of something far larger than a battlefield win. They are proof that this war has fundamentally changed, and Russia has not caught up. And there you have it, the full picture behind what many are calling the most strategically significant moment of this entire conflict. From a calculated retreat that looked like defeat to a digital kill switch that brought a superpower to its knees, Ukraine has rewritten the rules of modern warfare right before our eyes. Now I want to hear from you. What surprised you the most in today's breakdown? Was it the Starlink blackout, the balloon disaster, the mass surrenders? Whatever it is, drop it in the comments right now. I genuinely read every single one, and the best comments always spark the best conversations on this channel. If this analysis gave you something to think about, do me one simple favor. Hit subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss a deep dive like this one. Laura Collins is where the real story lives. I'll see you in the next one. Stay sharp.